Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life. I'm here to bridge the gap between the profound teachings of history's greatest philosophers and the real challenges you face every single day. Our mission is simple. Take the timeless principles that guided emperors, generals, and thinkers through humanity's greatest trials, and show you exactly how to apply them to transform your own life. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of Lucius Aeneas Seneca, one of ancient Rome's most fascinating and complex figures. Seneca wasn't just a philosopher sitting in an ivory tower pondering abstract concepts. He was a man who lived through unimaginable challenges while serving as advisor to Emperor Nero, managing vast wealth, and navigating the treacherous waters of Roman politics. Throughout his life, Seneca faced devastating setbacks that would have crushed most people. A near-fatal battle with tuberculosis in his youth, brutal political exile not once but twice, and ultimately execution ordered by the very emperor he had tried to guide toward wisdom. What makes Seneca extraordinary isn't that he avoided hardship, but rather how he transformed every obstacle into an opportunity for growth. He developed a philosophical framework that allowed him to maintain inner peace and purpose regardless of external circumstances. These weren't theoretical ideas for Seneca, they were survival tools forged in the fires of real adversity. The 8 secrets we're exploring today represent the core principles that carried Seneca through his most difficult moments and enabled him to live what he called the good life. These aren't feel-good platitudes or quick fixes. They're battle-tested strategies that have guided everyone from Roman emperors to modern Navy SEALs, from business leaders to ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. What you're about to discover challenges everything our culture teaches about success, happiness, and personal growth. While most people chase external validation, comfort, and easy victories, Stoic philosophy reveals a counterintuitive path. The route to genuine strength and lasting fulfillment runs directly through difficulty, discipline, and service to others. Each secret builds upon the previous one, creating a comprehensive system for mastering yourself and your circumstances. You'll learn why seeking comfort actually weakens you, how to find opportunity in your worst moments, and why the key to happiness isn't getting what you want, but wanting what you already have while working to become who you're meant to be. These principles transform Seneca from a sickly young man into one of history's most resilient figures. They've guided countless individuals through wars, economic collapses, personal tragedies, and the everyday struggles that test our character. Most importantly, they work just as powerfully today in our modern world of constant distraction, endless comparison, and relentless pressure. By the end of this journey, you'll possess a philosophical toolkit that makes you anti-fragile, not just able to survive life's challenges, but actually growing stronger because of them. You'll understand why Seneca said that every day offers us opportunities to practice virtue, and how that practice becomes the foundation for an extraordinary life. Secret number 1. Why your comfort zone is killing your potential. Consider the story of Marcus, a 34-year-old marketing executive in Manhattan. Every morning, Marcus hits the snooze button 3 times, grabs his usual coffee from the same corner shop, takes the identical subway route to his midtown office, and settles into the same predictable routine he's followed for 7 years. His work is competent but unremarkable. His relationships are stable but uninspiring. And his dreams of starting his own agency remain safely tucked away in the someday category. Marcus believes he's living a successful life, but Seneca would have seen something entirely different. a man slowly dying from comfort. Seneca understood a fundamental truth that modern society desperately wants to ignore. Comfort is not your friend. While our culture preaches the gospel of ease, convenience, and avoiding discomfort at all costs, Stoic philosophy reveals the hidden danger lurking within our comfort zones. When we consistently choose the path of least resistance, we don't just avoid growth. We actively program ourselves for weakness, mediocrity, and eventual failure when life inevitably demands more of us than we've prepared to give. The ancient Stoics developed a practice that would seem masochistic to our comfort-obsessed world, deliberately seeking out challenges and hardships. Seneca advocated for what he called voluntary discomfort, intentionally placing yourself in difficult situations to build strength and resilience. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days, during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" This wasn't about punishment or self-denial for its own sake. Seneca recognized that our capacity to handle adversity determines the quality and scope of our lives. Every time we choose comfort over challenge, we shrink our capability to deal with future difficulties. Conversely, when we voluntarily embrace discomfort, we expand our threshold for what we can endure and achieve. Modern neuroscience confirms what Seneca intuited 2,000 years ago. Our brains operate on a principle called neuroplasticity, the ability to form new neural pathways based on our experiences and behaviors. When we repeatedly choose familiar, comfortable actions, we strengthen those neural pathways while allowing others to weaken. Over time, this creates mental ruts that become increasingly difficult to escape. Our comfort zone literally reshapes our brain in ways that limit our future potential. Let's return to Marcus and imagine a different scenario. Suppose Marcus decides to implement Seneca's principle of voluntary discomfort. He begins waking up at 5:30 a.m. without snoozing, takes cold showers, and starts each day with a challenging workout that pushes his physical limits. At work, he volunteers for the most difficult projects and seeks out uncomfortable conversations with clients and colleagues. On weekends, instead of binge-watching Netflix, he practices public speaking at Toastmasters and takes weekend courses in areas where he feels incompetent. Initially, Marcus experiences significant discomfort and resistance. His body rebels against the cold showers. His mind creates elaborate excuses to avoid difficult conversations, and every fiber of his being screams for the familiar refuge of his old routines. However, Seneca taught that this resistance is precisely the signal that growth is occurring. The body should be treated more rigorously, that it may not be disobedient to the mind, he wrote. After 3 months of this deliberate discomfort practice, Marcus notices profound changes. The cold showers that once felt torturous now energize him. Difficult conversations at work, which previously triggered anxiety, become opportunities for connection and problem solving. His confidence grows because he has proven to himself that he can handle whatever challenges arise. Most importantly, he discovers that his previous comfort zone wasn't actually comfortable at all. It was a prison of low expectations and unrealized potential. This transformation occurs because voluntary discomfort serves as training for involuntary discomfort. Seneca knew that life would inevitably present us with challenges we didn't choose. Job loss, relationship problems, health crises, family emergencies, and countless other difficulties. The question isn't whether these challenges will come, but whether we'll be prepared when they arrive. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, Seneca observed, recognizing that transitions and difficulties are woven into the fabric of existence. When we practice voluntary discomfort, we develop what psychologists now call stress inoculation. Just as vaccines expose us to small amounts of disease to build immunity, deliberately choosing difficult experiences builds our psychological immune system. We learn that discomfort is temporary, that we're stronger than we initially believed, and that our fears are almost always worse than reality. The practical application of this principle extends far beyond cold showers and early wake-up times. In your career, voluntary discomfort might mean taking on projects that stretch your abilities, speaking up in meetings when you'd rather stay silent, or pursuing opportunities that feel slightly beyond your current skill level. In relationships, it could involve having difficult but necessary conversations, setting boundaries that initially feel uncomfortable, or being vulnerable when every instinct tells you to protect yourself. Seneca's approach to voluntary discomfort also includes mental exercises designed to build psychological resilience. He practiced negative visualization, regularly imagining the loss of everything he valued: his wealth, health, relationships, and life itself. This wasn't pessimistic thinking. It was preparation. By mentally rehearsing difficult scenarios, he removed their power to devastate him if they occurred in reality. The secret that Seneca discovered, and that Marcus learned through practice, is that our capacity for growth is directly proportional to our willingness to be uncomfortable. Every time we choose the difficult path over the easy one, we expand our capabilities and increase our confidence in handling future challenges. Our comfort zone isn't a place of safety. It's a place of stagnation that ultimately makes us more vulnerable to life's inevitable difficulties. Building on this foundation of voluntary discomfort, we can now explore how to respond when challenges arise that we didn't choose. Because even the most prepared among us will face circumstances beyond our control. Secret number 2. How to win when everything goes wrong. Imagine Sarah, a 29-year-old restaurant owner in Chicago who spent 3 years building her dream establishment. She carefully selected the perfect location, hired talented staff, and crafted a menu that reflected her culinary vision. Then March 2020 arrived, and within a single week, government mandates forced her to shut down indoor dining indefinitely. Her revenue plummeted by 90% overnight, her staff faced unemployment, and the business loan payments continued regardless of her circumstances. Sarah found herself staring at potential bankruptcy, watching her life's work crumble through no fault of her own. This scenario perfectly illustrates the central challenge that Seneca spent his entire philosophical career addressing. How do we respond when external forces beyond our control threaten to destroy everything we've built? Seneca's answer forms the foundation of Stoic resilience and represents perhaps the most practically powerful concept in all of ancient philosophy. Seneca's own life provided him with 3 devastating opportunities to test his philosophical principles. As a young man, just as his legal career was gaining momentum, tuberculosis struck with such severity that he spent a decade convalescing, watching his peers advance while he struggled simply to survive. Later, when he finally returned to political life and began building influence in Rome, Emperor Claudius exiled him to the harsh island of Corsica for 8 years based on false accusations. Then, in his final years, after serving as advisor to Emperor Nero and achieving unprecedented wealth and status, Nero turned against him and ordered his execution for allegedly plotting treason. Each time a catastrophe struck, Seneca could have focused on the unfairness of his circumstances, the cruelty of fate, or the incompetence of those in power. Instead, he developed what would become the cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, the dichotomy of control. This principle divides every situation into two categories: what we can control and what we cannot control. Our energy, attention, and emotional investment should flow exclusively toward what lies within our control. During his exile on Corsica, Seneca wrote, "You ask what fortune's motive was? She wanted to prove that circumstances neither elevate nor depress a person. They merely reveal who they have always been." Rather than raging against his unjust banishment, he used the time to deepen his philosophical studies, write extensively, and develop the mental frameworks that would guide him through future challenges. He transformed 8 years of punishment into 8 years of preparation. Returning to Sarah's restaurant crisis, we can see how applying Seneca's principle transforms both her emotional experience and her practical options. Sarah cannot control government mandates, economic shutdowns, or the broader pandemic. Focusing on these external factors leads only to frustration, anxiety, and paralysis. However, she maintains complete control over her response to these circumstances. Sarah begins by conducting what Seneca would call an honest assessment of her situation. She can control her business model adaptation, exploring takeout and delivery options, outdoor dining setups, and meal kit services. She can control her communication with staff, customers, and creditors, choosing transparency and collaboration over defensiveness and isolation. She can control her learning process, using this forced pause to study other restaurants that successfully navigated similar challenges, improve her financial management skills, and develop new revenue streams. Most importantly, Sarah can control her narrative about what's happening. Instead of viewing the shutdown as a catastrophe that's happening to her, she can reframe it as a market test that's revealing her business's true strengths and weaknesses. Seneca taught that our interpretation of events matters more than the events themselves. There is nothing either good or bad, he observed, but thinking makes it so. This reframing isn't positive thinking or denial of difficult realities. Seneca understood that genuine challenges require genuine solutions, not wishful thinking. However, he recognized that our emotional response to challenges either enhances or diminishes our problem-solving capabilities. When we focus on what we cannot control, we generate anxiety, resentment, and helplessness. When we focus on what we can control, we generate energy, creativity, and determination. Seneca also practiced what he called negative visualization, regularly imagining the loss of everything he valued. This wasn't pessimistic thinking, but rather mental preparation that reduced the shock and devastation when difficulties actually arrived. What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. He wrote, "By mentally rehearsing various scenarios, we build psychological resilience and identify potential response strategies before we need them." 6 months after implementing this Stoic approach, Sarah's restaurant had not only survived but evolved into something stronger than before. She developed a loyal takeout customer base, created cooking classes that generated additional revenue, and built relationships with other local businesses facing similar challenges. More importantly, she discovered reservoirs of creativity, resilience, and problem-solving ability that she never knew she possessed. The secret that Seneca discovered through his own repeated trials is that we become stronger not by avoiding difficulties, but by changing our relationship with them. When we stop fighting circumstances we cannot change and start leveraging our power to respond, we transform from victims of our situations into architects of our solutions. This principle applies whether you're facing job loss, relationship problems, health challenges, or any other crisis beyond your direct control. The external circumstances may be devastating, but your response remains entirely within your power. That response determines not just whether you survive the crisis, but who you become because of it. With this foundation of focusing on our responses rather than our circumstances, we can now explore how to deliberately shape the influences that guide those responses. Because the people we surround ourselves with largely determine the quality of our thinking and decision-making. Secret number 3. The 5-person rule that controls your future. Meet David, a 26-year-old graphic designer in Los Angeles who dreams of becoming a successful artist, but finds himself stuck in the same conversations every weekend. His college friends gather at the same sports bar, complaining about their jobs, mocking people who think they're better than everyone else, and dismissing artistic pursuits as unrealistic pipe dreams. When David mentions his latest painting or a gallery opportunity, the group quickly changes the subject or makes jokes about starving artists. After 3 years of these interactions, David notices he's stopped mentioning his art entirely and has begun to view his creative ambitions with the same cynicism as his friends. David is experiencing what psychologists call the proximity effect. But Seneca understood this phenomenon from a much deeper philosophical perspective. Nearly 2,000 years before modern research confirmed it, Seneca recognized that we inevitably become like the people we spend the most time with. Our thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, and even our sense of what's possible are profoundly shaped by our social environment. This isn't simply peer pressure or social influence. It's a fundamental aspect of human psychology that operates whether we're aware of it or not. Seneca wrote extensively about this principle because he understood that choosing our influences was essentially choosing our destiny. Associate with those who will make a better man of you, he advised. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach. This wasn't casual advice for Seneca. It was a strategic imperative based on his recognition that our character, capabilities, and life trajectory are largely determined by the 5 people with whom we spend the most time. The mechanism behind this influence operates on multiple levels. First, there's the obvious factor of shared activities and conversations. If your closest friends spend their time discussing television shows, workplace gossip, and weekend plans, these topics naturally dominate your mental landscape. Conversely, if your inner circle discusses books, business ideas, creative projects, and personal growth, your mind gravitates toward these more enriching subjects. Over time, these conversational patterns literally reshape your brain's neural pathways, making certain types of thinking more automatic and accessible. More subtly, the people around us establish what psychologists call social proof, the unconscious assumption that normal behavior is whatever the people near us are doing. If everyone in your social circle works 40 hours per week and spends evenings watching streaming services, this lifestyle feels normal and appropriate. If your social circle includes entrepreneurs working 80-hour weeks, artists creating daily, and people constantly learning new skills, this higher level of ambition and activity becomes your baseline expectation. Seneca experienced this principle firsthand through his relationship with his philosophical mentors and intellectual peers. Early in his career, he deliberately sought out the company of established philosophers, successful politicians, and accomplished writers. These relationships didn't just provide networking opportunities. They fundamentally altered his sense of what was possible and normal. Being around people who wrote influential books made writing books seem achievable. Spending time with successful political figures made political success feel attainable rather than impossibly distant. However, Seneca also learned the painful lesson of negative influences during his time advising Emperor Nero. Despite his philosophical training and strong moral compass, the constant exposure to Nero's cruelty, paranoia, and moral corruption gradually influenced Seneca's own decision-making. He found himself compromising principles he had previously held as absolute, rationalizing behaviors he would have condemned in others, and slowly adopting the cynical worldview that pervaded Nero's court. This experience reinforced his conviction that we must be extraordinarily careful about whose company we keep. Returning to David's situation, we can see how applying Seneca's wisdom transforms his trajectory. David begins by honestly assessing his current social circle and their influence on his thinking and behavior. He recognizes that while his college friends are good people, their shared negativity toward ambition and creativity is poisoning his own artistic aspirations. This doesn't mean David needs to abandon these friendships entirely, but he must reduce their influence while deliberately seeking more positive influences. David starts by identifying the type of people he wants to become like, then systematically putting himself in environments where he'll encounter them. He joins local art groups, attends gallery openings, and participates in creative workshops. He seeks out online communities of successful artists and designers. Most importantly, he begins reaching out to established professionals in his field, offering to assist with projects in exchange for mentorship and guidance. Within 6 months, David's social ecosystem includes 2 successful gallery artists, a creative director at a major advertising agency, 3 fellow emerging artists who share his ambition and work ethic, and a business mentor who helps creative professionals develop sustainable careers. The conversations in David's life now revolve around technique, upcoming exhibitions, business strategies for artists, and creative problem solving. His previous friends' defeatist attitudes seem increasingly foreign and unappealing. The transformation occurs because David has applied what we might call the 5-person rule, the principle that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This isn't just about career success or financial achievement. Your 5 closest relationships influence your health habits, your relationship patterns, your attitude toward learning, your tolerance for mediocrity, and your fundamental beliefs about what's possible in life. Seneca understood that this principle applies not just to living people but to the authors we read, the historical figures we study, and the philosophers whose ideas we absorb. He deliberately made Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and other great Stoic thinkers part of his intellectual inner circle by studying their writings daily and applying their principles consistently. In this way, he surrounded himself with wisdom that transcended time and circumstance. The practical application of this secret requires both subtraction and addition. You must honestly assess which relationships are pulling you toward mediocrity, negativity, or behaviors that contradict your values, then reduce their influence on your daily life. Simultaneously, you must actively seek relationships with people who embody the qualities you want to develop, the achievements you want to accomplish, and the character you want to build. This intentional curation of influences creates the foundation for genuine self-improvement, but it also reveals a crucial distinction between external validation and internal development, which leads us to our next secret. Secret number 4. Why self-help fails and what works instead. Picture Jennifer, a 31-year-old life coach in Miami who has consumed hundreds of self-help books, attended dozens of motivational seminars, and completed every online course promising personal transformation. Her bookshelf overflows with titles about manifestation, positive thinking, and unlocking your inner potential. She can quote Tony Robbins, recite affirmations with enthusiasm, and explain the latest productivity systems with impressive detail. Yet despite this extensive education in self-improvement, Jennifer finds herself constantly frustrated with other people's choices, judgmental about their lack of motivation, and increasingly bitter about the gap between what she preaches and what she actually experiences in her daily life. Jennifer's situation illustrates the fundamental flaw that Seneca identified in most approaches to personal development. They focus on changing external circumstances and other people rather than developing genuine mastery over ourselves. Modern self-help culture has transformed philosophy into a tool for manipulation rather than transformation, creating what Seneca would have recognized as a dangerous inversion of wisdom's true purpose. Seneca understood that authentic self-improvement serves one primary function: to make you a better master of yourself, not a better judge of others. The willing, destiny guides them. The unwilling, destiny drags them, he wrote, recognizing that our energy must flow toward what lies within our direct control, our thoughts, responses, and choices, rather than toward changing or controlling external factors, including other people's behavior. The problem with most self-help approaches becomes clear when we examine their underlying assumptions. They typically promise that learning certain techniques, adopting specific mindsets, or following particular systems will enable you to achieve desired outcomes in your relationships, career, and life circumstances. This creates an expectation that personal development should produce external results, leading to frustration when other people don't respond as the book suggests they should, when circumstances don't align with your positive thinking, or when visualization exercises don't manifest the career changes you desire. Seneca experienced this temptation firsthand during his role as advisor to Emperor Nero. Despite his philosophical training and genuine desire to create positive change, Seneca repeatedly found himself trying to use his wisdom to control Nero's behavior rather than simply governing his own responses to Nero's actions. This external focus gradually corrupted Seneca's judgment and led him to compromise principles he had previously held as absolute. The lesson he learned was painful but profound. The moment we start using philosophy to change others rather than ourselves, we cease to be philosophers and become manipulators. True self-discipline, as Seneca taught it, operates on entirely different principles. It begins with the radical acceptance that you can only control yourself, your thoughts, responses, and choices, while everything else, including other people's behavior, remains outside your sphere of influence. This isn't a limitation to overcome, but rather a liberation to embrace, because it means you can achieve complete mastery within your actual domain of control without depending on external cooperation. Let's imagine Jennifer applying Seneca's approach to her coaching practice. Instead of focusing on techniques to motivate her clients or strategies to produce specific outcomes in their lives, she would concentrate exclusively on becoming the best possible version of herself during each coaching session. She would focus on listening with complete attention, responding with genuine compassion, and offering insights without attachment to whether clients accept or implement them. Her measure of success would shift from client outcomes to her own consistency in embodying the principles she teaches. This transformation fundamentally changes the entire experience of personal development. When Jennifer stops trying to control her clients' progress and instead focuses solely on her own growth as a coach, several remarkable things happen. First, she experiences immediate relief from the frustration and resentment that arise when people don't change according to her expectations. Second, her coaching actually becomes more effective because clients sense her authentic presence rather than her agenda to change them. Third, she begins developing genuine wisdom rather than just accumulating techniques and strategies. Seneca wrote extensively about this distinction because he recognized that most people approach philosophy backwards. They want to learn how to change their circumstances rather than how to master their responses to circumstances. They seek techniques for influencing others rather than methods for governing themselves. They pursue external validation rather than internal integrity. This approach inevitably leads to disappointment because it places your satisfaction and sense of progress in areas beyond your control. The Stoic alternative focuses on what Seneca called the examined life, a daily practice of honest self-assessment, deliberate character development, and consistent application of philosophical principles to your own thoughts and behaviors. This means asking yourself questions like, how did I respond to criticism today? Rather than, why can't people accept feedback better? Or, what triggered my anger in that meeting? Instead of, why are my colleagues so unreasonable? This inward focus doesn't create selfishness or isolation. Paradoxically, when you stop trying to fix other people and concentrate on perfecting your own character, you become dramatically more helpful to everyone around you. Your presence becomes calming rather than demanding. Your advice carries weight because it emerges from lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. And your relationships improve because people sense your acceptance rather than your judgment. The practical application of this principle requires a complete reversal of conventional self-help thinking. Instead of reading books to learn how to influence others, you study philosophy to understand yourself. Instead of attending seminars to gather techniques for achieving external goals, you develop practices for maintaining internal equilibrium regardless of circumstances. Instead of measuring progress through external metrics like income or relationship status, you assess your development through internal metrics like emotional stability, consistent values, and genuine compassion. This foundation of true self-mastery creates the clarity and focus necessary for the next secret, understanding why scattered attention leads to mediocre results, while concentrated effort produces extraordinary achievements. Secret number 5. The focus method billionaires don't want you to know. Set the scene. Michael, a 28-year-old software developer in Seattle, sits at his desk surrounded by the modern symbols of productivity. 3 monitors display different projects. His phone buzzes constantly with notifications. He's simultaneously working on 5 client applications, listening to a productivity podcast, and planning his weekend side hustle. Michael believes this multitasking approach demonstrates his capability and ambition. He proudly tells colleagues about his diverse skill set and multiple income streams. Yet despite this constant activity, Michael feels perpetually behind, produces work that's competent but never exceptional, and watches less busy colleagues achieve breakthrough successes that seem mysteriously out of his reach. Michael has fallen victim to what Seneca identified as one of the most destructive myths of achievement: the belief that doing more things leads to better results. 2,000 years before neuroscience confirmed the cognitive costs of task switching, Seneca understood that excellence requires elimination, not addition. His famous observation, "He who is everywhere is nowhere," reveals a profound truth about human psychology and the nature of mastery that directly contradicts our culture's celebration of busyness and diversification. Seneca's insight emerged from observing the most successful people in Roman society. The senators who wielded real influence focused on specific areas of expertise rather than trying to master every aspect of governance. The merchants who built lasting wealth concentrated on particular trade routes and products instead of pursuing every available opportunity. The philosophers who created enduring wisdom dedicated themselves to specific schools of thought rather than sampling every intellectual trend. Excellence, Seneca realized, was always the product of concentrated effort applied consistently over extended periods. This principle operates because of fundamental limitations in human cognitive architecture. Our brains can only process a finite amount of information at any given moment, and switching between different types of tasks requires mental energy that reduces our overall effectiveness. When we attempt to pursue multiple goals simultaneously, we don't just divide our attention. We actually diminish our capacity to perform any single task at the level required for breakthrough results. Modern research has quantified what Seneca intuited. Task switching reduces productivity by up to 40%, increases error rates significantly, and prevents the deep focus states necessary for creative problem-solving and complex analysis. Every time Michael switches from coding to checking email, answers his phone while debugging, or thinks about his side project while working on client applications, his brain must expend energy reorienting to the new context. This constant cognitive switching creates what psychologists call attention residue, mental fatigue that accumulates throughout the day and dramatically reduces the quality of his work. The billionaires and high achievers who understand this principle structure their lives around what Seneca would call strategic elimination. They deliberately say no to opportunities that seem attractive but don't align with their primary focus. They create systems that protect their attention from fragmentation. Most importantly, they recognize that every yes to something meaningful requires multiple no responses to things that are merely interesting or potentially profitable. Imagine Michael applying Seneca's focus principle to transform his approach to work and life. Instead of juggling 5 client projects simultaneously, he decides to work on 2 projects at maximum capacity, delivering exceptional results that justify premium pricing and generate enthusiastic referrals. Rather than maintaining 3 different side hustles, he eliminates 2 and concentrates all his entrepreneurial energy on developing one into a genuinely profitable business. Instead of trying to learn every new programming language and framework, he becomes genuinely expert in the technologies most relevant to his primary goals. This elimination creates what appears to be a paradox but represents the core of Seneca's wisdom. By doing fewer things, Michael accomplishes more meaningful results. His concentrated attention allows him to enter what psychologists call flow states, periods of deep focus where time seems to stop and his capabilities exceed normal limits. The quality of his work improves dramatically because he can dedicate sustained attention to solving complex problems rather than constantly switching between different challenges. His learning accelerates because he builds deep expertise in specific areas rather than surface-level familiarity with many topics. Seneca practiced this principle in his own life by focusing his philosophical work on practical ethics rather than attempting to master every branch of ancient philosophy. He concentrated his political influence on specific policy areas where he could create meaningful impact rather than trying to influence every aspect of Roman governance. This focus allowed him to produce writings that have influenced thinkers for 2 millennia and to achieve political influence that few philosophers have ever matched. The practical implementation of strategic focus requires what Seneca called the discipline of desire, the ability to distinguish between what you want to do and what you should do based on your primary objectives. This means honestly assessing your current activities and eliminating those that don't directly contribute to your most important goals, even when those activities are enjoyable or potentially profitable. For most people, this elimination process reveals how much of their time and energy flows toward activities that feel productive but don't actually advance their primary objectives. Email, social media, news consumption, networking events, and even some professional development activities often fall into this category. They create a sense of busyness without producing proportional results. This concentrated focus creates the foundation for developing genuine resilience and capability, which brings us to our next secret: understanding how deliberate difficulty builds the mental strength necessary to sustain excellence under pressure. Secret number 6. How physical pain builds mental power. Consider this scenario. Rebecca, a 32-year-old marketing professional in Boston, has always been proud of her mental toughness. She graduated from a competitive MBA program, handles demanding clients with confidence, and considers herself someone who doesn't give up easily. However, when her company announces a major restructuring that threatens her position, Rebecca discovers something unsettling about herself. Despite her professional accomplishments, she finds herself lying awake at night consumed by anxiety, unable to concentrate during the day, and feeling completely overwhelmed by uncertainty she cannot control. Rebecca's situation reveals a crucial gap that Seneca identified in most people's development. We often build mental resilience accidentally and incompletely, leaving ourselves vulnerable when life presents challenges that exceed our previous experience. While Rebecca developed intellectual toughness through academic and professional demands, she never systematically trained her mind to handle sustained psychological pressure, uncertainty, and discomfort. Seneca understood that true mental strength requires the same deliberate, progressive training that we apply to physical development. Seneca's approach to building mental resilience centered on a principle that seems counterintuitive to our comfort-seeking culture. Voluntary physical discomfort serves as the most effective training ground for developing psychological strength. He wrote, "The body should be treated more rigorously, that it may not be disobedient to the mind, recognizing that our physical and mental capacities operate as interconnected systems rather than separate domains. This connection exists because both physical and mental challenges trigger the same fundamental psychological process. The voice in our head that generates compelling reasons to quit, avoid, or choose easier alternatives. When we're lifting weights and our muscles begin to fatigue, our mind creates elaborate justifications for stopping. This is enough for today. I don't want to risk injury. Or, I can make up for it tomorrow. The exact same voice operates when we face psychological challenges. This job search is too stressful. I'm not qualified for that promotion. Or, I'll deal with this problem later when I feel more prepared. The quality of our lives depends largely on whether we develop the capacity to recognize this voice and choose our actions based on our values and objectives rather than our momentary feelings of discomfort or resistance. Physical training provides an ideal laboratory for developing this capacity because the stakes are lower and the feedback is immediate. When we learn to persist through physical discomfort during exercise, we build neural pathways associated with persistence that become available during psychological challenges. Seneca practiced this principle through what he called voluntary hardship, deliberately choosing physical discomfort as mental training. He would sleep on hard surfaces to build tolerance for inconvenience, eat simple foods to reduce dependence on pleasure, and walk long distances in difficult weather to strengthen his capacity for endurance. These weren't punishment or ascetic practices for their own sake, but rather systematic training for developing the mental qualities he would need during involuntary hardships. Modern neuroscience has confirmed Seneca's intuitive understanding of this mind-body connection. When we repeatedly choose to persist through physical discomfort, we strengthen the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, emotional regulation, and overriding immediate impulses in favor of long-term objectives. Simultaneously, we reduce the reactivity of the amygdala, the brain structure that triggers fight or flight responses to perceived threats, including psychological stressors like job uncertainty or relationship conflicts. Imagine Rebecca applying Seneca's principle to build genuine mental resilience. She begins incorporating deliberate physical challenges that require her to persist through discomfort while maintaining mental clarity and emotional control. She starts taking cold showers, gradually extending the duration while practicing calm breathing and positive self-talk. She adds high-intensity interval training to her exercise routine, using the moments of peak physical stress to practice maintaining focus and determination when every instinct tells her to stop. Most importantly, Rebecca begins connecting her physical training directly to psychological development. During challenging workouts, she practices the same mental techniques she wants to use during stressful work situations, acknowledging discomfort without being controlled by it, maintaining focus on her long-term objectives when facing immediate difficulty, and choosing persistence over avoidance when her mind generates reasons to quit. This training creates what Seneca called strength of character, the ability to maintain your principles and pursue your objectives regardless of external circumstances or internal resistance. The person who learns to complete a difficult workout despite feeling tired develops the same mental capacity needed to have challenging conversations despite feeling anxious. The discipline required to maintain proper form during physical stress translates directly to maintaining professional standards during periods of uncertainty and pressure. The mechanism operates through what psychologists now call stress inoculation, controlled exposure to manageable stress that builds capacity for handling larger challenges. Just as vaccines expose us to small amounts of disease to build immunity, deliberate physical challenges expose us to controlled discomfort that builds psychological immunity to stress, anxiety, and adversity. 6 months after implementing this approach, Rebecca notices profound changes in her response to professional challenges. The same restructuring announcement that previously triggered sleepless nights now prompts systematic action planning. She approaches networking conversations and job interviews with the same calm determination she's developed during intense workouts. Most importantly, she discovers that her capacity to handle uncertainty and discomfort has expanded dramatically, making her more confident and effective in all areas of her life. The secret that Seneca discovered is that we can systematically build mental strength through physical challenge rather than waiting for life to randomly test our psychological resilience. This creates a foundation of genuine confidence based on proven capacity rather than positive thinking or wishful hoping. This foundation of mental and physical strength becomes crucial when we face the ultimate challenge that gives urgency to all our efforts: the reality that our time is limited and largely being wasted. Secret number 7. Why you're already dead and how to come back to life. Visualize this. James, a 35-year-old financial analyst in San Francisco, sits in his corner office reviewing quarterly reports while simultaneously scrolling through social media on his phone. He checks his email every few minutes, half listens to a conference call while browsing news headlines, and thinks about weekend plans while pretending to focus on budget projections. James believes he's being productive by multitasking, but if we examined his day through Seneca's philosophical lens, we would witness something profoundly disturbing. A man who is technically alive but functionally dead, frittering away the most precious resource in existence without even realizing it. This scenario illustrates what Seneca considered the greatest tragedy of human existence. Not that life is short, but that we waste enormous portions of it while remaining completely unconscious of this waste. In one of his most powerful letters, Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about the relationship between time and death, presenting an insight so startling that it fundamentally changes how we understand mortality and meaning. Seneca argued that we shouldn't think of death as something approaching us in the future, but rather as something that has already claimed every moment of our past. According to this perspective, James hasn't lived 35 years. He has already died 35 years. Those decades of distracted attention, mindless routine, and unconscious habit represent time that death has permanently claimed. The minutes James spends scrolling through social media while pretending to work aren't just unproductive. They're literally portions of his life that he's surrendering to oblivion without receiving anything meaningful in return. When Seneca says we are dying every day, he means this quite literally. Each moment of inattention or mindless activity represents a small death, a piece of our finite existence that vanishes forever. This understanding transforms our relationship with time from casual to urgent, from abundant to precious. Most people operate under the unconscious assumption that time is renewable, that wasted hours can somehow be recovered, and that meaningful living can be postponed until some future period when circumstances become more favorable. Seneca recognized this assumption as perhaps the most dangerous delusion humans carry, because it prevents us from recognizing the extraordinary value of present moments. The mathematical reality supports Seneca's urgency. If James lives to 80, he has roughly 16,000 days remaining. However, when we subtract time spent sleeping, eating, commuting, and handling routine maintenance tasks, his conscious, discretionary time shrinks to perhaps 6,000 meaningful days. When we further account for the reality that energy, health, and mental clarity decline with age, James may have only 3,000 high-quality days left to pursue his most important objectives, build meaningful relationships, and create lasting contributions. But Seneca's insight goes deeper than simple time management or productivity optimization. He understood that most people sleepwalk through their lives, experiencing their days through a haze of distraction, routine, and unconscious habit. They respond automatically to emails, scroll mindlessly through social media, engage in conversations without genuine attention, and pursue goals they never consciously chose. This isn't really living. It's a form of suspended animation where consciousness flickers occasionally but never fully engages with reality. The path back to genuine life, according to Seneca, begins with what he called present moment awareness, the practice of consciously inhabiting each experience rather than mentally residing in the past or future while physically occupying the present. This means giving complete attention to whatever activity demands your focus, whether that's listening to a colleague, reading a report, or simply walking from one location to another. When attention becomes fully present, time transforms from something we endure or rush through into something we actually experience. Let's imagine James applying Seneca's approach to reclaim his life from the gradual death of distraction. He begins by identifying the activities and habits that consume his time without providing proportional value or meaning. Social media browsing, news checking, mindless television watching, and multitasking during important conversations all fall into this category. Rather than trying to eliminate these activities entirely, James starts by becoming conscious of them, noticing when his attention drifts toward distraction and gently redirecting it toward whatever deserves his focus. This consciousness creates what Seneca called time expansion, the experience of actually living through moments rather than sleepwalking past them. When James gives complete attention to his work projects, he finds that tasks require less time while producing better results. When he listens to his wife without simultaneously checking his phone, their conversations become more meaningful and satisfying. When he reads books with genuine focus rather than scattered attention, he absorbs more information and finds greater enjoyment in the learning process. Seneca also practiced what he called death meditation, regularly contemplating the reality that his current day might be his last. This wasn't morbid thinking, but rather a technique for maintaining perspective on what truly matters versus what merely seems urgent. When we genuinely internalize the fact that our time is finite and largely unpredictable, trivial concerns lose their power to capture our attention, while meaningful activities gain urgency and clarity. The transformation that occurs through this practice involves a fundamental shift from time scarcity to time abundance. Paradoxically, when we become fully conscious of time's limitations, we discover that present moments contain far more richness, meaning, and satisfaction than we previously recognized. The person who gives complete attention to simple activities like eating, walking, or conversing often experiences more fulfillment in a single conscious hour than they previously found in entire days of distracted activity. This awakening to the preciousness of time and the power of present moment consciousness creates the foundation for our final secret, discovering how genuine fulfillment comes not from what we achieve for ourselves, but from what we contribute to others. Secret number 8. The happiness formula ancient Rome discovered. Here's the scenario. Maria, a 38-year-old community organizer in Denver, has achieved everything she thought would make her happy. She owns a beautiful home, maintains a successful career, enjoys financial security, and has traveled to dozens of countries. Yet despite these accomplishments, Maria finds herself feeling strangely empty and restless. She scrolls through social media, seeing friends' achievements, and feels a mixture of envy and inadequacy. Her conversations revolve around personal problems, weekend plans, and career advancement. Most troubling to Maria is the growing sense that, despite all her success, she hasn't made any meaningful difference in the world beyond her own immediate circle. Maria's experience reveals what Seneca identified as the fundamental flaw in most approaches to happiness. We seek fulfillment through accumulating benefits for ourselves, rather than creating benefits for others. Modern culture teaches us that happiness comes from getting what we want: better jobs, nicer homes, more recognition, improved relationships, or enhanced experiences. However, Seneca discovered through his own life and philosophical study that this approach creates what we might call the happiness paradox. The more we pursue personal satisfaction, the more elusive it becomes. Seneca's insight emerged from observing both his own experience and the lives of other wealthy, powerful Romans who seemed to have everything yet remained profoundly dissatisfied. He noticed that the people who appeared most content and fulfilled weren't necessarily those with the greatest personal achievements, but rather those who dedicated significant energy to improving the lives of others. This led him to one of his most profound observations: happy is he who makes others better. This principle operates through psychological mechanisms that Seneca understood intuitively but that modern research has now mapped in detail. When we focus primarily on personal advancement and self-improvement, we create what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, the tendency for increased pleasure and satisfaction to return to baseline levels despite improved circumstances. The promotion we desperately wanted provides only temporary satisfaction before becoming our new normal. The relationship we thought would complete us eventually feels routine. The financial security we worked years to achieve fails to deliver the lasting contentment we expected. However, when we direct our energy toward making others better, we tap into what researchers now call eudaimonic well-being, satisfaction that comes from meaning and purpose rather than pleasure and comfort. This type of fulfillment doesn't adapt or diminish over time because it's based on contribution rather than consumption. The teacher who helps struggling students improve doesn't experience declining satisfaction from their success. The mentor who guides younger colleagues doesn't find their impact less meaningful after repeated experiences. The parent who supports their children's development doesn't grow bored with their nurturing role. Seneca practiced this principle throughout his life, even during periods when his personal circumstances were extraordinarily difficult. During his exile on Corsica, rather than focusing on his own suffering and injustice, he wrote letters offering philosophical guidance to friends facing their own challenges. These letters not only helped others navigate difficult circumstances, but also provided Seneca with a sense of purpose and meaning that sustained him through 8 years of banishment. His focus on making others better transformed his punishment into an opportunity for contribution. The mechanism behind this happiness formula operates on multiple levels that build upon each other to create lasting satisfaction. First, when we work to make others better, we shift our attention away from our own problems, limitations, and unmet desires. This mental redirection breaks the cycle of rumination and self-focus that often underlies anxiety, depression, and general dissatisfaction. Second, seeing positive changes in other people provides immediate, tangible evidence that our efforts matter and that we possess the capability to create a meaningful impact. Most importantly, this approach connects us to something larger than our individual existence, creating what Seneca called cosmic perspective. The understanding that we are part of an interconnected human community where individual fulfillment emerges through collective contribution. When Maria shifts from asking, "What can I achieve for myself?" to "How can I help others achieve their potential?" she taps into a source of meaning that transcends personal circumstances and creates genuine, sustainable satisfaction. Let's imagine Maria applying Seneca's happiness formula to transform her experience of daily life. Instead of measuring her success through personal accomplishments and possessions, she begins evaluating her days based on how effectively she helped others improve their situations. At work, rather than focusing primarily on her own advancement, she starts mentoring junior colleagues and sharing knowledge that helps them succeed. In her community, she volunteers with organizations that address problems she cares about, contributing her skills to causes that extend beyond her immediate interests. This shift creates what Seneca described as the virtuous circle of contribution. The more energy Maria directs toward making others better, the more capable and confident she becomes, which increases her ability to make even greater contributions. Her focus on helping others develop new skills forces her to deepen her own expertise. Her mentoring relationships provide fresh perspectives that enhance her problem-solving abilities. Her community involvement connects her with like-minded people who share her values and expand her social impact. The transformation occurs because Maria discovers that her own fulfillment naturally emerges as a byproduct of her focus on others' well-being rather than as a direct goal to pursue. This aligns with Seneca's observation that happiness cannot be captured through direct pursuit, but must be earned through virtuous action and meaningful contribution. When we make others better, we simultaneously become better ourselves, not as a calculated strategy for personal improvement, but as an inevitable consequence of engaging with life's deeper purposes. With these 8 secrets now revealed, we can see how they work together to create a comprehensive approach to mastering yourself and finding genuine fulfillment through ancient wisdom applied to modern challenges. Your Stoic journey starts now. These 8 ancient secrets from Seneca represent more than philosophical concepts. They form a complete system for transforming how you experience every aspect of your life. When you embrace voluntary discomfort, you discover strength you never knew you possessed. When you focus on your responses rather than your circumstances, you reclaim power over your emotional state and life direction. When you carefully choose your influences, you accelerate your growth and surround yourself with wisdom. When you master yourself instead of trying to change others, you develop genuine confidence and inner peace. As you eliminate non-essential activities to focus on what truly matters, you unlock levels of achievement that seemed impossible when your attention was scattered. When you use physical challenges to build mental strength, you create unshakable resilience that serves you in every difficult situation. When you become conscious of how precious your time really is, each moment gains depth and meaning that transforms ordinary experiences into sources of fulfillment. Finally, when you shift your focus from personal achievement to making others better, you discover the kind of lasting happiness that no external circumstance can diminish. The beauty of Seneca's approach lies in how these principles build upon each other, creating what we might call compound wisdom. Each secret you implement makes the others more powerful and easier to practice. The person who has developed comfort with voluntary discomfort finds it easier to focus on their responses during crises. Someone who has mastered strategic focus discovers they have more energy available for making meaningful contributions to others. The individual who has built physical and mental resilience approaches time consciousness and service with greater capability and confidence. Remember that Seneca developed these principles not in academic isolation but through decades of real-world application during some of history's most challenging circumstances. He faced tuberculosis, political exile, service to a tyrant emperor, and ultimately execution, yet maintained his philosophical principles and found meaning in each difficult situation. This proves that these ancient secrets work not just during comfortable times, but especially when life tests us most severely. Your journey toward mastering these principles begins with a single choice. Will you start applying one of these secrets today? Or will you file this knowledge away for some future moment that may never arrive? Seneca understood that philosophy without practice remains merely intellectual entertainment. The transformation these secrets offer requires consistent application, not perfect understanding. Start with whichever secret resonates most strongly with your current situation. If you feel stuck in comfort, begin with voluntary challenges. If you feel overwhelmed by circumstances, practice focusing on your responses. If you feel scattered, implement strategic elimination. The specific starting point matters less than the decision to begin. These ancient secrets have guided human beings through every conceivable challenge for over 2,000 years. They have the power to transform your experience of work, relationships, adversity, and daily life. The question isn't whether they work, it's whether you'll commit to applying them consistently enough to experience their transformative power. If this content has provided value in your life, please subscribe to Stoic Vivu to continue your philosophical journey with us. Like this video to help others discover these timeless principles, and share it with anyone who might benefit from ancient wisdom applied to modern challenges. Together, we can build a community of people committed to living with virtue, wisdom, and purpose.